Well, good morning and welcome to our TLC Church podcast for this Sunday. I want to welcome you from wherever you're watching this and whenever that might be, and whether it's the first time you're tuning in or whether you've seen everyone up until now. I just want to say a big welcome and thank you so much for joining us. Let's continue to worship our God together.
My shepherd, I'll not want. He makes me lie in pastures green. He leads me by the still waters. His goodness restores my soul, and I will trust in you.
We just have a couple of announcements quickly to go through. If you're not receiving the TLC Church community email on a Friday and you would like to be, just send us a message on our Facebook page or email us at office@tlcchurch.org.au and we'll get those sent out to you. They contain information such as the details for the Zoom virtual coffee shop that's still happening every Sunday at 11 a.m, the details for the tithes and offering, various prayer needs and the office opening times as well. This is a really difficult time for a lot of us, and if you're finding yourself needing to chat to someone, feel free to contact anyone at the office, either by phone or by email, and we'd love to talk with you, we'd love to pray with you, and if there's any way we can physically help you out, we'd love to do that as well. So just contact us during the week, during the office open hours, and we'd love to chat with you.
Life is a journey, made easier when we have a faithful, constant companion.
When the day has begun and the darkness is done, and my eyes see the sky so blue, I put on my clothes, I'm ready road with you. So I'm walking down the road, walking down the road, walking down the road with you. Yes, I'm walking down the road, walking down the road, walking down the road with you. You know how it goes when I'm walking the road. I'm a child, everything seems new. I trip, hurt my knees, lose my way in the trees. So I'm walking down the road with you. So I'm walking down the road, walking down the road, walking down the road with you. Yes, I'm walking down the road, walking down the road, walking down the road with you. You can see where to go, feel the wind as it blows, in the day and the night time too. You know when to run, when to rest in the sun, so I'm walking down the road with you. So I'm walking down the road, walking down the road, walking down the road with you. Yes, I'm walking down the road, walking down the road, walking down the road with you. Oh, stay by my side, Jesus, you be my guide. Don't you know how I trust in you? Show me where I should call, pick me up when I fall. So I'm walking down the road with you. So I'm walking down the road, walking down the road, walking down the road with you. Yes, I'm walking down the road, walking down the road, walking down the road with you.
Well, the kids are back at school this week. Some of them are getting to learn at school and some of them are still doing online learning. So parents, we're praying for you in that space, and hopefully it's not going to last too long this time around. That also means that our kids programs at church are back. So for our preschoolers, today you're going to be learning about a man called Zacchaeus who was really short and he hid up in a tree to see Jesus. So you're going to be reading that story. And for our primary school program, that's John Bonner, we're continuing our series on the miracles of Jesus. If you get your parents to check their emails, you'll find the story and some questions and some activities to go along with those. And something new and exciting that's happening this term for our kids is that every Sunday morning at 9:30 a.m. for half an hour, we're going to be having our own virtual Zoom meeting so that we can gather and chat and connect and maybe play some games and hear a song from time to time. And if you didn't receive the details for that Zoom meeting that I sent out earlier in the week and you would like to because you have a child aged 0 to 12, just let me know and or any of the team here know, and we'll get those sent out to you so you can join us for next week.
The reading comes from Joshua chapter 2. Then Joshua, son of Nun, secretly sent 2 spies from Shittim. Go look over the land, he said, especially Jericho. So they went and entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there. The king of Jericho was told, Look, some of the Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land. So the king of Jericho sent this message to Rahab, Bring out the men who came to you and entered your house, because they have come to spy out the whole land. But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them. She said, Yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they had come from. At dusk, when it was time to close the city gate, the men left. I don't know which way they went. Go after them quickly, you may catch up with them. But she had taken them up to the roof and hidden them under the stalks of flax she had laid out on the roof. So the men set out in pursuit of the spies on the road that leads to the fords of the Jordan, and as soon as the pursuers had gone out, the gate was shut. Before the spies lay down for the night, she went up to the roof and said to them, I know that the Lord has given this land to you, and that A great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to Sihon and Og, the two kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, whom you completely destroyed. When we heard of it, our hearts melted and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is God given in heaven above and on earth below. Now then, please swear to me by the Lord that you will show kindness to my family, because I have shown kindness to you. Give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and that you will save us from death. Our lives for your lives, the men assured her. If you don't tell what we are doing, we will treat you kindly and faithfully when the Lord gives us the land. So she let them down by a rope through the window, for the house she lived in was part of the city wall. Now she had said to them, "Go to the hills, so the pursuers will not find you. Hide yourselves there 3 days until they return, and then go on your way." The men said to her, "This oath you made us swear will not be binding on us unless, when we enter the land, you have tied this scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down, and unless you have brought your father and mother, your brothers and all your family into your house. If anyone goes outside your house into the street, his blood will be on his own head. We will not be responsible. As for anyone who is in the house with you, his blood will be on our head, if a hand is laid on him. But if you tell what we are doing, we will be released from the oath you made us swear." "Agreed," she replied. "Let it be as you say." So she sent them away, and they departed, and she tied the scarlet cord in the window. When they left, they went into the hills and stayed there 3 days, until the pursuers had searched all along the road and returned without finding them. Then the two men started back. They went down out of the hills, forded the river, and came to Joshua, son of Nun, and told them everything that had happened to them. They said to Joshua, "The Lord has surely given the whole land into our hands. All the people are melting in fear because of us."
For now, we do have a story for the kids. As we've just started a new preaching series on Joshua, both the name of a man and the name of a book of the Bible. This story comes from Joshua chapter 2, and it's called Joshua and the Spies. After Moses died, Joshua became the leader of the Israelites. God led them into the promised land. He led them to a city called Jericho. The city was protected by high walls. Still, 2 spies found a way into the city. They went to Rahab's house. The king of Jericho ordered his soldiers to capture the men. Rahab hid the men on her roof. When the soldiers arrived, she said, "The spies have already gone. If you hurry, you may catch them." So the soldiers ran off to find them. "Thank you for helping us," the spies told her. "When we come back, we promise to save you and your family." Then Rahab helped the spies escape.
And now we will pray for the community. I pray for all the people in the community to keep safe and well, and that everyone cooperates long enough for the virus to stop.
I pray for the people having a hard time, struggling, and the people who've lost their jobs. And I pray for the people who are sick.
I pray for the parents and that God helps them manage homeschooling and the kids going back to school. Amen.
Hi, I'm Noah, and I'm going to pray for the offering and for Julie's sermon. Dear God, I pray for the offering and I pray for the sermon Julie's about to present to us. I pray that you help Julie with the sermon and that you give us all something to think about over the next week. Amen.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to TLC Church Online. It's really great that you could join us today. And today I'm going to be continuing our series on the book of Joshua. And last week, David started our new series with a bit of an introduction to the book, and he looked at chapter 1. And so this morning, we're going to look at chapter 2 and the story of Rahab. Now, When I was thinking about this, I was thinking when I read the book of Joshua, and I particularly started focusing on chapter 2, I started thinking about Mission Impossible movies. And I'm not sure about you, but I think I've watched most of the Mission Impossible movies. And when I read chapter 2 of Joshua, it reminds me of a plot for a Mission Impossible movie. So let's have a listen. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to check out the city of Jericho and look over the land of Canaan. As always, should you or any members of your team be caught or killed, the secretary will disavow any knowledge of your actions. This message will self-destruct in 5 seconds. Good luck, and thanks again. You see, this was the second mission into the area and into this area. And the first mission, it had been 40 years earlier. And if you can read about that in Numbers chapter 13 and 14. But back then, Moses, he sent the first 12 spies, and Joshua and Caleb had been part of that mission. And they brought back Moses good reports of a land that was filled with milk and honey. It was fertile land. It was abundant land. It had great crops. But the people were fearful. So it didn't happen. They didn't cross the Jordan into Canaan. But now, 40 years later, Moses has died, and Joshua, he's been appointed the new leader of the Israelites, and so he's calling the people to obey God and his covenant promises. So he sends these 2 agents into the land, basically to conduct a reconnaissance mission. Jericho, it was a strategic location. It was a key place that could unlock the whole of Canaan. And when they got there, after they crossed the Jordan, they went to a place that belonged to Rahab. Now, Rahab, she was a prostitute, and perhaps this place was chosen because it was relatively inconspicuous. 2 men visiting wouldn't draw any undue attention. Also, I think it was chosen because it was situated on the wall of the city of Jericho. So there was an escape route. They could go out the window, down the wall, and be gone. But this is a dangerous situation. It's a dangerous mission. Now, there are 2 reasons for spying out the land. One was so that they could get some military information regarding the lay of the land, the terrain, the fortifications, the strength of the troops, and information as to how Jericho was defended. And the second reason, I think, was part of God's big plan, that Rahab would contribute to Joshua's success and for God to call people to himself and protect the lives of those in Jericho who would become followers of the God of Israel, and also in particular to protect Rahab, who was to play a significant part in the Messianic line. She was eventually going to become the great-great-grandmother of King David. But there was this big problem. Somehow, the king of Jericho, he'd got wind that there were some spies in the city, so he sent these men out to look for them. And when they knocked on Rahab's door, she hid the spies up on the roof, and then with great animation, she lied to the king's officers. It was a brilliant piece of acting. Yes, 2 men did come to me, but I had no idea where they were from. Absolutely no idea. I've never seen them before in my entire life. And when it started to get dark, when the gate was about to shut, the men left, and I've got no idea where they went. But look, hurry up, chase them. You can probably still catch them. Yeah, I'm sure you could catch them. Chase them. So then she just stood back and watched as the king's men set off down the Jordan road towards the fords. And as soon as they were gone, the gate to Jericho was shut. Unbeknown to the king's men, however, she'd hid the men, the spies, up on the roof under a heap of flax. So she went up to the roof for a bit of a chat with these 2 wanted men, these 2 fugitives. And she was like, look, I know that God has given you the land. We're all afraid. Everyone in the country feels hopeless. We've heard the stories. We've heard how God dried up the waters of the Red Sea right in front of you when you left Egypt. And we heard what God did to the 2 Amorite kings east of the Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom you put under a holy curse and destroyed. We heard it, and our hearts sank. Our hearts sank. We had the wind knocked out of us. We were afraid. All because of you and your God of the heavens above and God of the earth below. And then she said to the spies, now promise me by God, I showed you mercy, now show my family mercy and give me some tangible proof, a guarantee of life for my father, my mother, my brothers, my sister, everyone connected with my family. Save us from death. Our lives for yours, said the men, but don't tell anyone our business when God turns this land over to us. We'll do right by you in loyal mercy. So they made a bit of a deal. The spies said to her, in order to keep this oath that you've made us swear, here's what you have to do. Hang a red rope out the window, the one that you let us down out of, then gather your family all together, your mother, your brothers, your father, all your sisters, and then anyone who goes out the doors of the house into the street and is killed, well, it's their fault. We're not responsible. But everyone in this house, we will guarantee. We'll take full responsibility for them. And if anyone lays a hand on them, it's our fault. But if you tell anyone our business, the oath you made us swear is cancelled. We're no longer responsible. So the deal was struck. She said, okay, if that's what you say, that's the way it is. And they went, yeah, okay, deal. A deal was done. So she lowered them out the window with the rope because her house, remember, was on the city wall to the outside. And she said, run for the hills so the men won't find you. Hide out for 3 days. Give the king's men time to return. Then, get on your way. So the guys left. She hung the rope out the window and they headed off for the hills. Then following all of that, 3 days later, after the men came back, they crossed the river, went to Joshua and reported everything that had happened. They told him everything. And they said, look, God has given the whole country to us because everyone there is in a state of panic. So that's basically the story of what Rahab did and how she protected the spies. But let's take a closer look at Rahab. Here's a woman that, if we look at her from the perspective of her own people, she was far from patriotic in the real sense of the word. She was a traitor, a woman who betrayed her own people by telling the spies how scared and how anxious the people of Jericho were of the Israelite people and their God. So in some ways, you could view her as a selfish woman who cared only about saving herself and her immediate family. She even abandoned her own beliefs. She professed faith in Yahweh, the God of heaven and earth. She confessed her faith by recalling the great deeds of the Lord and their effect on the present situation. This was also a woman who risked everything when she boldly lied to the king and made effectively fools of his men. You could say she preferred to save the lives of strangers rather than her own people. And yet, here we see her fully identifying with the spies' mission. And so she did everything she could to make it possible and make it successful. Now, when Rahab is mentioned in the book of Joshua, she's referred to as Rahab the prostitute. And even later in history, she's still called that name. She's still referred to by that name, even though she'd become a faithful follower of the Lord and she was part of the Messianic line. In all the Jewish literature, Rahab's portrayed as a heroine. She's portrayed as a model new believer. She's portrayed as a woman who is worthy to be included in the genealogy of Jesus. In Rahab, we find a woman who rose from being marginalised to being a key central figure. She eventually married Salmon and was the mother of Boaz and the great-great-grandmother of King David and eventually an ancestor of Jesus in the family line of Jesus. And we read in the book of Hebrews in chapter 11 how Paul, he commends her for her incredible faith, and she's named in this long list of Old Testament people who were people of faith. And she was the only woman besides Sarah, who was Abraham's wife, who was held up as an example of faith. So her story is quite a story, and it's worth looking at. It's worth unpacking and exploring what that means for us today. But I think there's a question of how do we reconcile the faith of Rahab with her attitude towards her own people? Rahab flatly refused to do the will of the king and the inhabitants of Jericho. And she did this because of her faith in Yahweh and in the mission of the spies, which she talks about in the narrative. And she also outwitted the king's men pretty well. And I think her actions were part of God's design. And I think she had a divine calling on her life that perhaps we don't fully understand. Rahab was really, you could say she was really a very courageous woman. She was savvy, she was smart, and in her profession you could imagine that she had to be independent. She had to be defiant and perceptive, and it was these traits that we see really illustrated in this story. She was willing to face anything that might come her way as a result of looking after the two spies. And she had to overcome her fear right there, right then, in that moment. She didn't have time to think about it. She just had to act. And she was willing to take a risk and risk not only her own life, but the life of her entire family. Not just because she hid the two spies, but because she came up with such a big lie to throw the king's men off the track, and that allowed the spies to escape. So if she'd been caught, she would no doubt have been put to death. Rahab agreed to the condition that the spies gave her. First, to keep their mission a secret. Second, to tie the crimson cord around and out the window so it would be seen. And the third one was to make sure all her family, all her people were gathered in the same room, in the same house. And then the spies kept their oath that they made to her and saved her life and those of her family. You know, it got me thinking. Courageous people are risk takers. Courageous people take risks, real risks. And this was true for Rahab. And her story, what it shows us is that she was not only courageous, she was a person who took risks. Courageous people often take risks. There are times when we're all called to be courageous, and often that invites us to take some risks along the way. And it's these courageous moments, these moments that involve risk, that make life as followers of God, followers of Jesus, sometimes really extraordinary. Every day we face risk. Some risks are small, tiny in fact. Others are much bigger. But the best risks are those that God invites us to take, that God puts before us. And we're called on to jump in and be courageous and take a risk. I think, Rahab's story, it represents, if you like, a spiritual picture of God's transforming work in people's lives and in our own lives. It's an example of faithfulness to the mission that God entrusted to his people to make his name known to all the earth. Rahab, she risked her life. And she moved from her social status, which was really low, she was really marginalised, to be a model of new life, new faith, and part of a new nation. Her life teaches us that God meets every person wherever they are. He invites us as we are and where we are. And he uses those circumstances and those situations to call us to follow. Her story shows us that God's love can and does transform lives. Her story shows us that God's love can and will transform each one of us. I think spiritual transformation really happens when we're not in control, when we're out of control, when we give up being in control of doing what we want, and when we choose our life in favour of God's life. It's that kind of paradoxical upside down thing, like when Jesus said, whoever finds his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. A life transformed by courageous risk-taking, by surrendering, by giving up and living our lives following Jesus. This story, it's really an image of grace and of goodness, and I think it's an image of the transforming love of God for all people. There's a risk stepping out in faith. You know, there really is. Who are we going to trust? Will we trust the Lord with all our heart? You know, what if we're wrong? What if we're wrong? Is it really God calling us to take a risk, to take a step of faith? Do you ever find yourself holding back from following God's will, or holding back from following God's call on your life because you feel like you don't fit the mold? Be courageous. Take a risk. Trust God. Follow Jesus. And as we read in Joshua 1, study this book of instruction. Study God's word continually. Read it. Meditate on it day and night so you'll be sure to obey everything written in it. Only then will you prosper and succeed in all you do. This is my command. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. I think this is really important for us today, knowing that God is with us in the midst of everything that's happening around us. And I really think the challenge for us today is to really take a risk and put our trust in God and really know that we know that God is on our side. God is on your side. We've all been invited. We've all been invited to partake in this story, to simply, fix our eyes on Jesus, to allow his transforming power to change us from the inside out. We've all, every one of us, been invited to take a risk and to put our trust in him. In spite of everything that is going on around us, in Jesus, there is life. When we look to Jesus, when we take a risk, when we put our trust in him, we experience God's transforming love for us. May you be courageous. May you take a risk and follow Jesus today and trust him with all your heart and with all your life. Amen.
We now come to a time of communion, so I just encourage you to pause this video now and go grab the elements that you would like to use, whether that's bread or juice and wine and crackers. Just go grab those now and come back and take those when you feel ready during the next song.
I dare not trust the sweetest friend.
cornerstone, cornerstone, weak made strong in the Savior's love through the storm. He is Lord, Lord of all.
Thank you so much for joining us today, and a big thank you to the team that helped put it all together. For Julie for the inspiring sermon yet again, for Francis for the amazing worship, for Mike for putting it all together, and for the McLeases for the Bible reading and the prayers. Thanks so much. I just want to leave you with this blessing from Numbers. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace. Have a great week, everyone.
Come set your rule and reign in our hearts again. Increase in us, we pray. Unveil why we're made. Come set our hearts ablaze with hope, like wildfire in our very souls. Holy Spirit, come invade us now. We are your church. We need your power in us. We seek your kingdom first. We hunger and we thirst. Refuse to waste our lives, for you're our joy and prize. To see the captive hearts released, the hurt, the sick, the poor at peace. We lay down our lives for heaven's cause. We are your church. We pray, revive this earth. Build your kingdom here. Let the darkness fear. Show your mighty hand. Heal our streets and land. Set your church on fire. Win this nation back. Change the atmosphere. Build your kingdom here. We pray. Unleash your kingdom's power, reaching the near and far. No force of hell can stop your beauty changing hearts. You made us for much more than this. Awake the kingdom seed in us. Fill us with the strength and love of Christ. We are your church. We are the home on earth. Build your kingdom here. Let the darkness fear. Show your mighty hand. Heal our streets and land. Set your church on fire. Win this nation back. Change the atmosphere. Build your darkness clear. Show your mighty hand, heal our streets and land. Set your